Hey y'all, guess what? We finally hit 1,000 subscribers. Can you guys believe that? Because I surely can't. I really had no faith in myself whatsoever. So, I was racking my brain trying to think of what to do to celebrate and hitting such a milestone like this. And a lot of ideas just bounced around. And finally, I thought it would be fun if every time we hit a major subscriber goal, we talk about a theme, like a series. I'm gonna let you guys in on a little secret. They make army men that aren't army. I know, shocker, right? So, every time we hit a subscriber goal, we're gonna do a special on a different theme. So, pirates, space, you know, cops and robbers, all of these themes, and we're going to do a special. So starting now, this is the Plastic Commander Wild West Extravaganza. So let me go ahead and get into character. That's right, the helmet never comes off.
This is my hell.
So in this part 1 of 2, we're going to be looking at my entire Wild West collection. Wild West, as far as themes go, is probably my second biggest, next to actual army men. So this is gonna be a 2-parter because I just have so many, and I also ordered more just to talk about them for this video. So without wasting any more time, say it with me, without further ado, let's jump right into it. So the first set we're going to be looking at may be really familiar to all of you guys, as it's a set that gets knocked off pretty heavily, and that is clones of Airfix Wild West figures. So back in the day, Airfix, the model company, used to make army men of their own, and they were really top-notch and high quality. And really, they weren't really army men like you would think. They didn't come in like a bag. They were actual model figures. You bought them and you painted them. And they were a really good gift for a older child. All of those guys fell over. They're all casualties. They're all dead, and they are going to see God. And they're going to have to look him in the face and explain all of their sins to him. But anyway, they were kind of sets you would give to an older child. They would sit down, and you would get the paints that sometimes they came with paints. But you would get paint, acrylic, and you would paint them. The colors, they usually have recommended colors on the back of their boxes, but you could paint them whatever you wanted. And they made tons of different figures. They made sports figures. They made mostly World War II sets. They made a plethora of World War II sets. And they also made Wild West figures. And then, around the 70s and the 80s, the company Timmy, you know, King Timmy, king of the dime store toy, started knocking their figures off. Which these guys just will not play nice today. Which is really funny that Timmy started knocking off Airfix, because out of all of the toy armyman companies, Timmy is like the most knocked off. Like, companies still knock off Timmy armymen today, and they still knock off Airfix figures today. Like, most of the armymen you see are knockoffs of one of those two. And it's funny that Timmy knocked off Airfix. So, these aren't actually Timmy knockoffs of Airfix. These are knockoffs of Timmy's knockoffs. It's like knockoffception here.
So how did we end up here?
Because after Timmy went defunct, a lot of companies started knocking off the Wild West figures they made, and these are it. Really, the only difference between the Timmy figures, which these, like I said, these aren't Timmy, so the Timmy ones are pretty much just like these. Just imagine them a little glossier, and they feel a little bit more like regular Timmy army men, you know, like the Vietnam soldiers. So that's really the only difference. And also, a lot of the Timmy sets would usually have just 2 colors or multiple colors like this. And that's how I know they're knockoffs of the Timmy knockoffs, because the Airfix figures were just tan. They were blank colors because you were supposed to paint them. And then Timmy knocked them off, made them in a variety of different colors. These ones here, blue, yellow, green, red. And then all the other knockoff companies started making their own knockoffs of those knockoffs. I'm saying knockoff a lot.
I'd knock that shit off if I was you.
So, you probably had some of these growing up, no matter what age you are. If you grew up in the 70s, you probably had the Timmy ones. You grew up in the 2000s, you probably had just some that were made by Imperial. Imperial knocked them off. And a Hong Kong company, that real big one that makes tons of knockoff Army Men, they also made them. So, pretty much all of these are from Airfix, even the guys on horses. And interestingly enough, along the way somewhere, a company decided to make accessories like wooden fences, this canoe, this teepee, and a covered wagon. So this is just one of the sets I got. You can find this set. I got it in the souvenir shop while on vacation, but you can probably find it online. I'm pretty sure Amazon sells some that are eerily similar to these. These Cowboys and Indians that you had, if you ever were wondering where they came from Airfix, and pretty much everyone just decided to knock them off. When in reality, Timmy knocked them off, and then everyone knocked off Timmy's knockoffs. So let's knock off to the next figure. So next on the totem pole, we have some knockoffs of Ideal Cowboys and Indians. So, the Ideal Toy Company was really big in the 50s and 60s. They're not nearly as well talked about as Timmy or Marks or MPC, mostly because their figures were kind of lower quality. They just weren't nearly as popular. But these are knockoffs of their figures. Again, more knockoffs. And they were made by Hong Kong. Just somewhere in Hong Kong.
It comes from China.
I don't know what company or what toy company in Hong Kong made these figures, but I do know a child probably making like 3 cents an hour were the ones who bagged them up. I can tell you that for sure. So that's about the extent of my knowledge of Ideal, and also the company that made these figures. I just know that these are not original figures. But anyway, Ideal knockoff toy figures. Kinda cool. So my first thought when I saw these small figures was that, oh, Marks must have made some 132 scale 54mm figures of their Wild West figures. And no, no, that's not what those are. So, behind the small guys, you will see some figures that sit on the Commander Quarter shelf, and these are 6-inch Marks figures. So you look at the bottom, you see Marks, or Plastimarks. If you ever see one that says Plastimarks on the bottom, that was just a company that was in Mexico that made Marks figures. Those are still Marks. They actually made figures up until the 90s. But anyway, off topic. These are the only Wild West Marks figures that I own, are these 6-inch ones, and these down here are knockoffs, as you can see, but they're really well done knockoffs. Like, I don't know who made these, but they were made back in the 70s and 80s. So towards the twilight years of Marks, where it probably would have been way easier to make knockoff figures. Saying the word knockoff a lot in this episode. But anyway, these are all sculpts that were Marks. If you're older, you probably recognize this one the most. This one was really, really popular. So, these figures are still really, really cool. I don't know a whole lot about them, like I said. The only thing I do know is that they're knockoffs of Glencoe Marks Wild West figures, especially their 6-inch series. So, like you can see, smaller version of that guy. So, as we grow closer to the end of part 1 of this extravaganza, so too do we grow closer to the end of our natural born lives. So, coming back to Timmy, hey, did you guys know that Timmy, on top of making Airfix knockoff Cowboys and Indians, also just made their own series that was really popular? Yeah, in the late 50s, early 60s, they made these. These guys, however, let me grab one of the 54mm figures, are a little bit bigger. I'm actually not super sure what this larger scale is off the top of my head. But yeah, these figures were much, much larger. This was before, like, Army Men companies kind of had an idea that they wanted their figures to be, like, 2 and 3 inches. Like Army Men today, most Army Men are close to the same size as each other, mostly because Army Men companies or people who make Army Men realize that kids probably will have other Army Men, and Army Men that kind of just stand out as being way larger just, don't sell as well.
I think maybe you're too big? It would cost a fortune to mail you. You're enormous.
Although these were real popular way back in the day. So, like I said, these are from the late 50s, early 60s. These were some of the first Wild West sets that Timmy produced, some of their earliest sets. And, yeah, they were real popular. Some of the first ever toys Timmy actually made were Wild West themed. And a lot of other companies knocked them off. Although I haven't really seen any knockoffs of these, so these are a little bit more obscure than the Airfix knockoffs. But they're still really cool. Like, look here, we got a guy getting shot, Native American, and I have a bunch of different colors, but you may see the ones that are brown, and this tan one here, that's because BMC Toys actually reproduces these, but they're only in those 2 colors. Now, if you find them in these other colors, like green, and yellow, and red, and I think, off the top of my head, those are 3 of the only ones, are the only 3 that they were made in. Then those were actually vintage from the 60s. So, on top of those, I have a couple of figures that I'm not super sure are Timmy, but I'm fairly certain they are. And it's this one cowboy lady, so, which is really cool because you don't see a lot of toy lady figures from back in the day unless you talk about Campus Cuties made by Marks. And back here, that lady on the horse, who I also own in red right here. And I also have a horse bar. So, I'm not actually sure if those are Timmy. They did come with a big bag of these that were Timmy that I got from a thrift store. So, I'm going to assume they are because the plastic is extremely similar. But they're just a few molds I've never seen. So, going through the figures just a little bit. We got this guy right here with the tomahawk. Of course, we got the regular old rifleman, bow and arrow. And of course, there's always a guy with a spear in these sets. In fact, I didn't even put him out. There he is. So, one thing you'll see that repeats in all of these Wild West sets is a guy chucking a spear. So, Timmy, pretty large figures, pretty cool though. So, I spent a lot of time just racking my brain, months. I bought these figures months ago, like probably 8 months ago. So I started doing some hardcore digging, and it turns out these are vintage Glencoe Marks figures. Like, honestly, they're so alien compared to the Glencoe Marks you may have known from the 60s, because these figures are some of their earlier figures from the 50s. It makes sense, because I have some of their American GIs from the 50s, and they're very similar in the molds and, like, body proportions, face design, stuff like that. So, looking at now, yeah, it makes sense. And you can actually buy these reissues from the Toy Soldiers website. But yeah. And also another giveaway of a set is a Mark set is just the sheer quantity of individual figures. So, most of the Mark sets probably had like 20 different figures. It's not like, Timmy, where you got your rifleman, you got your prone guy, the mortar guy, a minesweeper. You get like 8 dudes. It's just those repeating. Almost every figure in a lot of their play sets were unique. And every single figure here is unique. That's why they're all sprawled out. So, and all of these are really cool. We got a guy who's looking. Then we got this Native American guy who's running with a knife. He's probably from the UK.
No, not yet. Not until me and Harvey get the rules straightened out.
Rules? In a knife fight? No rules. What?
Well, if there ain't gonna be any rules, let's get the fight started. Someone count 1, 2, 3, go. 1, 2, 3, go. I was really rooting for you, Butch.
And then 2 of my favorite figures is this guy who is surrendering, and this guy just holding a gun walking, and you can put them one in front of the other to make it look like this guy is escorting a prisoner. Or, reversely, you can put them one behind the other, And this guy looks like he's just fed up, about to go shoot someone. And this guy behind him looks like he's just cheering him on. Just like, whoop, whoop, let's go blow, Jason's head off. Whoop, whoop, celebrate. Another interesting duo are these two right here. This guy, who's just, I don't know what he's doing, an impersonation of a chimpanzee, I guess. Or maybe he's just trying to cleanse himself of his sins with some Gamer Girl bathwater. That's the proper way to do it. And then this lady right here who's crouched down. And what's really interesting about her is that she has a baby on her back, if you can make that out. There we go. You know, I really, really wish they'd just make an Army Men set that's nothing but babies. Although I'm pretty sure that's a thing. But anyway, vintage, very old. These are probably some of the oldest Glencoe Marks figures that I owned. And like I said, it took me forever to figure out who made them, just because I'm so used to Marks figures from the 60s and the 70s that are slightly bigger than this. They have way more detail, and the figures are just nicer molds. Like, if you look at the bases are kind of weak, and they have some plastic still hanging off them. Fun story, the guy I bought these from, these were his. He was an older gentleman at the flea market, and he was selling these, and I got them for a really good price, especially knowing now that they're vintage Marks figures. If I had known that, I probably would have paid more, but I just didn't realize it at the time. So, vintage Marks Cowboys and Indians, really, really old Cowboys and Indians. So, there you guys have it. That's the end of part 1 of the Wild West. Why does God hate me? So, there you guys have it. That's the end of part 1 of the Wild West Extravaganza. So, make sure you like and subscribe so you can stay tuned for part 2 coming out later this week, where we're going to look at 5 more sets. And before we end this video here, I wanted to say before we end this video, I wanted to give a few special thank yous since we hit 1,000. First of all, everyone at work who watches my channel, thank you guys so much, especially you, Kyle. You've been one of my biggest supporters, even though you've only been working with us just a few weeks now. Thank you for sharing my channel. Everyone on my Discord. So right now the Discord's at 19, and I want to see that grow a little bit more. So head over to my Discord. It's in the description of the channel. That's where the link is, as well as the link to my Reddit page and our subreddit, Plastic Toy Dudes. So, again, thank you guys so much for the support, and I can't wait to see you in part 2. So, stay tuned later this week for that. Bye.
Hey, you can't park that animal over there. It's illegal.